They say you can't lie to a scientist. But Celeste did, and she almost got away with it. When she told me she was pregnant, I remember feeling like the world finally made sense. I was 34, settled in my career, and for the first time, the idea of being a father didn't terrify me. It thrilled me. We'd only been dating a little over a year, but love moves fast when you're in denial. The first time I saw the ultrasound, I cried. I'm not embarrassed to admit that. I remember thinking, this is what it means to have a purpose. Celeste smiled, kissed my cheek, and squeezed my hand like we were some perfect couple. In that sterile room with fluorescent lighting and a grainy image on the screen, I fell a little deeper. But even then, something gnawed at me. The timing didn't line up. The due date was odd. Her explanations were fuzzy. But love makes you want to believe people, even when they hand you jigsaw puzzles with missing pieces and say, trust me, it's all there. Still, I'm a geneticist. It's my job to ask questions. So, I asked one that changed everything. Would you mind if we did a prenatal DNA test? Just to screen for abnormalities. She hesitated, laughed it off, told me I was paranoid. I smiled back and told her it was routine. But it wasn't routine. I wanted to know if the baby was mine. A week later, the results came in. It wasn't. I remember the way the blood drained from my face, how my hands went numb holding the report. I read the page twice, then a third time, hoping maybe the science I'd devoted my life to was suddenly wrong. It wasn't. The baby she was carrying didn't share my DNA. Not even close. I stared at her that night over dinner. She was laughing at something on her phone, one hand absent-mindedly resting on her belly, eyes glowing like the world was hers. She had no idea I knew, and I wasn't about to tell her. Not yet. Because that was the moment I decided that if she could lie to me with a smile on her face, I could destroy her with the truth. Slowly, methodically, and in a way she would never see coming. I didn't yell. I didn't confront. I didn't storm out. I leaned in. I played the perfect partner. Held her hair back when the nausea hit, massaged her feet at night, read every damn baby book cover to cover. I let her believe she had won. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't always need fire and screaming. Sometimes the coldest revenge is knowing something they don't, and waiting. So I waited. Waited until her contractions started. Waited until we were in the delivery room, her squeezing my hand and screaming through the pain. Waited until the moment she held the baby, not her baby, in her arms and wept with joy. That's when I knew. She had no idea what I'd done. And by the time she found out, she would have to live with it, just like she expected me to live with her lie. When Celeste and I first met, I didn't imagine we'd ever become something serious. She worked in corporate PR. Charming, articulate, always dressed like she was one meeting away from conquering the world. I met her at a bioethics panel I was guest speaking at. She wasn't there for the science. She was there for the photographers. She asked me a question during the Q&A, something about gene editing and the future of designer babies. I gave my best professional answer. She gave me her best professional smile, and then slipped me her card as I was leaving the venue. Her confidence was magnetic, and her beauty, well, that was obvious. I'd never been with someone like her. I'd dated quiet women, academic women, people who spoke my language and lived in the same data-driven world I did. But Celeste spoke headlines. She moved in fast, and I let her. Within 3 months, we were living together in my apartment. She turned my minimalist space into something that looked like a Pinterest board. Too many throw pillows, curated books she never read, plants that somehow all died within weeks. But I didn't mind. I liked the noise. I liked not coming home to silence. She made life feel spontaneous. Weekend trips, rooftop dinners, elaborate plans that didn't always pan out, but were fun in the making. My colleagues were surprised. So was I. But I let myself believe that maybe unpredictability was what I needed. The cracks started showing around month 8. She started disappearing on weeknights, claiming late meetings or spontaneous networking dinners. I didn't push. She always had a convincing answer. She was good with words, and I wanted to believe her. Then came the pregnancy. She told me one morning over coffee. No build-up, no fanfare. Just casually placed the test next to my mug, like it was another article in the morning paper. "I'm pregnant," she said, like she was telling me we were out of almond milk. I looked at the test, then at her. Her face was unreadable, neutral. My heart jumped anyway. Despite everything, despite the doubts, I felt something. Joy, terror, a mix of both. Then she smiled, that rehearsed, pageant-winning smile. And just like that, I was pulled back in. She said she wanted to keep it. She said she'd always dreamed of being a mother. She said all the right things. I nodded, agreed, played my part like a man handed a script he didn't audition for. But the timing nagged at me. We'd been distant, barely intimate in weeks. Something wasn't right. So I did what any rational man would do. I asked questions. Gently at first, then more pointedly. She brushed them off. I told myself to stop spiraling. Not everything had to be a conspiracy. Sometimes life just happened. And this was one of those chaotic, beautiful, unplanned things. I held on to that idea until the first ultrasound. And even then, I tried to rationalize the irregularities. Tried to believe that genetics sometimes just played tricks. But I'm a geneticist. I knew better. So I ran the test. And the test answered me with brutal honesty. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat on the floor of the guest room, holding that single sheet of truth in my hands, while Celeste slept in our bed, wrapped in my blanket, dreaming her dreams. I thought about confronting her. I imagined her crying, denying, manipulating. And then I thought, what if I didn't? What if I waited? What if, instead of walking away, I turned this into something she'd never forget? That's when the plan began. I started keeping notes, tracking conversations, cross-referencing her timelines, digging into her phone when she was asleep. She wasn't subtle. There were names I didn't recognize. One in particular that came up often. Reese Callahan. I remembered him. He was at one of those rooftop parties, the kind of guy who wore tailored shirts too tight and laughed a little too loud. She said he was an old family friend. Turns out they were very close. I found hotel receipts, dinner bookings, messages written in the kind of shorthand lovers use when they think no one's looking. Reese wasn't just the father. He was the reason she'd lied at all. She thought she could trap me, thought a baby would bind me to her, keep her lifestyle intact, give her a safety net of money and prestige without the inconvenience of honesty. But she'd forgotten who I was. I don't play games I can't win, and I don't forgive deception. The thing about betrayal is, it never feels sudden. It's a slow rot, a creeping decay beneath something that once looked whole. I became an actor in my own life after I discovered the truth. Every kiss I gave her, every "I love you," every gentle hand on her stomach was part of a performance. And I performed well, better than she ever knew. Because I wasn't just playing a role. I was rewriting the script. Celeste had no idea I knew. And that was my power. She started glowing with the pregnancy, not just physically, but socially. Her social media presence exploded. Filtered bump selfies, morning yoga shots, captions like "growing love" or "baby Callahan." Carter. It was all performative, all curated, for attention, for control. She threw herself into preparations with the kind of manic energy only liars possess. Designer nursery decor, pre-birth branding deals, even a paid partnership with a baby product line I'd never heard of. The baby wasn't even born, and she was monetizing the illusion. Meanwhile, I watched, waited, calculated. I began constructing a different kind of cradle, one made of facts, timelines, and legal options. I met quietly with a lawyer, then a second one. I asked hypothetical questions about paternity fraud, about custody disputes, about asset protection in case of domestic deceit. What I learned gave me fuel. In our state, paternity can be challenged up to 2 years after birth, if you can prove fraud. And I had the DNA test, the messages, the receipts, everything. But I didn't want revenge through the courts. Not yet. I wanted something deeper, something that would sting not just her pride, but her perception of herself. Celeste didn't just want a family. She wanted the image of one, the applause, the admiration, the envy. So I started to give her exactly that. I went along with everything. The maternity shoot? I booked the photographer myself. The baby shower? I made a speech so loving half the room cried. I even let her parents believe I was the most devoted father to be on earth. And every time she smiled at me with those doe eyes, I smiled back. Because I knew how temporary it all was. She was nesting hard in the final month. Organizing drawers, folding and refolding baby clothes, lighting those lavender candles she insisted helped with relaxation. I watched her hum lullabies to a baby that wasn't mine. Her face was soft, peaceful, unaware of the storm that brewed right beside her. One night, while she slept, I opened her laptop. She never logged out of anything. Typical Celeste. She trusted too easily, which made it so much easier for someone like her to lie, and so much easier for me to find the cracks in her facade. In her messages, I found new threads of conversations. Photos. She was still in touch with the man I now knew to be the real father, Axel Warren. A former flame, she told me, was just a fling in grad school. Turns out, that fling had a full photo album of sonograms labeled "Our Little Secret." It wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated deception. I copied everything. Screenshotted messages, downloaded the photos, even recorded a video scrolling through her chats as proof. But still, I didn't confront her. Instead, I invited Axel to a business event, through a fake LinkedIn profile I created. Posing as a producer, scouting for a documentary on fatherhood. And he bit. He showed up at a private networking mixer I co-hosted under a different name. I made sure he saw Celeste from across the room, pregnant, radiant, with me right beside her. His eyes widened. He didn't approach, he just stared, frozen in recognition. I made sure he saw me kiss her. Later, I watched him leave early, shaken. That night, Celeste curled into me on the couch, whispering about how lucky she felt. I brushed the hair from her face and whispered back, "Me too." Because luck? Luck had nothing to do with what was coming. Celeste's due date crept closer, and the nursery became her sacred space. She painted clouds on the ceiling, hand-picked wooden toys from local artisans, and insisted on writing a letter to our son each night before bed. She had no idea the man beside her was already someone else. She kept asking why I was so calm, so patient. Most men freak out during the 9th month, she'd tease, resting her hand on her belly. But you're just zen. Zen. I was meditating on justice. The night she went into labor, everything was already set. I had spoken with the head nurse weeks prior. I'd visited the hospital under the guise of scheduling a maternity photo shoot for a friend. I had eyes on every corner, and a private investigator working with a retired nurse walked me through the weaknesses in hospital protocol. Fake IDs, bribes, loopholes. I didn't want to hurt anyone, not even Celeste. But I wasn't about to raise another man's child, especially one I'd been tricked into believing was mine. Celeste screamed through hours of labor while I held her hand, encouraging her, whispering promises. We'll be a family. We'll be okay. When the baby arrived, squirming, loud and red-faced, my heart did jolt. There was still part of me, some frail muscle deep inside, that wished the world were simpler, that this child could have been mine, that love could have been enough. But lies rot everything they touch. While Celeste rested, sedated and exhausted, I stepped out for air. And in that window, those few hours after birth, I made the switch. It wasn't kidnapping. It was a transfer. Arranged, silent, clean. The child I left in that room wasn't Axel Warren's son. It was mine. Celeste would wake up to the wrong baby with no idea what she'd lost. And I would raise the only truth I had left. People say a lie dies when the truth arrives. But that's naive. Lies don't die, they adapt. They evolve. And sometimes, they fight back harder. Celeste woke up cradling the wrong baby, unaware of the new world she'd just stepped into. The nurse handed her our son, and she cried, thanking me for staying. I held them both and said nothing. I watched the way she smiled, relieved, glowing with maternal joy. And I thought, you don't know the storm you just birthed into your arms. But now came the harder part. It wasn't enough to just take back what was mine. I needed answers. And I needed to make sure this lie wouldn't resurrect itself years from now, claws sharpened. I started with Axel Warren. He wasn't hard to find. He'd been sloppy, hiding in plain sight, assuming the baby sealed his secret. A few digital footprints, an encrypted email chain, and 2 burner phone intercepts later, I had his full identity, address, and an entire folder of financial movements Celeste would never dream of understanding. He worked in pharmaceutical sales. He was older than me by 7 years, and apparently Celeste liked her men established. But Axel had a weakness: ego. I baited him anonymously, posing as a woman looking for consultation, and he responded within 2 hours. I watched him flirt over text. I recorded the call. I even got a confession, not about the baby, but about Celeste. He bragged about her like a trophy. She wanted a kid, but not the responsibility. She said she had someone else lined up to be the dad. Rich, dependable, total pushover. Poor bastard. That pushover was me. It took everything in me not to burn his life to the ground right there. Instead, I compiled every shred of proof: audio files, texts, surveillance footage, clinic receipts. I created a timeline of deceit that started a year before the pregnancy and tracked every move they made. I wasn't just going to win. I was going to prove I deserved to. Celeste, meanwhile, remained clueless. She posted baby updates online, wrote long captions about how our son looked like me, inherited my ears, had daddy's smile. The irony was suffocating. Every like, every heart emoji under her posts was another nail in her coffin. I kept playing my role. I let her believe we were healing, that the past was forgiven, that this baby had mended everything. She didn't know I'd already found the birth certificate swapper. She didn't know I'd tracked her OBGYN's offshore bank transfers. She didn't know I was talking to a lawyer every week under a different name. I was building a case, not just emotional, not just moral. A legal, surgical revenge, one she wouldn't see until it was far too late. The first time I met the real father in person, he didn't know who I was. I wore a tailored coat, glasses I didn't need, and walked into the coffee shop as if I were just another client. Axel was 20 minutes late, arrogant as ever. When he finally showed up, he ordered the most expensive latte and sat like he owned the place. He didn't recognize me, but I recognized him instantly. From photos Celeste had deleted, but I'd recovered. From the clinic's father's registry. From security camera footage at the hotel she used to visit on Wednesday nights. I introduced myself as Daniel Blake, freelance investigator. "I'm looking into a paternity dispute," I said. "The woman says her baby might not be her husband's." Axel chuckled like it was a sitcom script. "Let me guess, she wants child support?" "Not quite," I said. "She wants to make sure the real father isn't a coward." That hit him. I watched the mask shift. He looked around, then lowered his voice. "You know who she is, don't you?" I didn't answer. "Listen," he leaned in. "It's complicated. She told me the baby wasn't mine. She swore it. You knew," I cut in. "From the ultrasound, from the prenatal tests. You knew, and you helped her lie." He went pale. "I have recordings," I added. "Phone logs, messages, bank transfers, DNA reports. If I file this with the court, you're on the hook for paternity fraud and conspiracy." "What do you want?" he asked. I slid a photo across the table. A picture of him holding a different baby, one I had planted in his inbox from an anonymous source. "I want you to play along, publicly. I want you to act like the proud father. I want Celeste to see it all." He stared at the photo. "She'll come to you when she's desperate," I continued. "She'll want support. Tell her you've changed your mind, then disappear. You're insane. No, I'm a father, and you're just a distraction." I stood up and left him staring at his coffee, heart pounding, future evaporating. Let him stew. The next few days were a carefully orchestrated storm. I leaked just enough hints online, private accounts, anonymous tips, to let the cracks show in Celeste's perfect little image. I dropped the DNA report, untraceable, into her gynecologist's inbox. I left one for her boss. I scheduled a court summons for custody fraud and paternity deception. And through it all, I held the baby that wasn't mine, whispering stories of justice and truth into ears too small to understand. Celeste sensed something. She started asking questions. She grew paranoid. She cried when I came home late. She searched my phone when she thought I was asleep. She told her friends I'd changed, become cold. And yet, she kept smiling for the camera, for the world, pretending everything was okay, because liars only know how to perform. But I'd already written the final act. It all came to a head the day the social worker called. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kellen," she said, "but there seems to be an inconsistency with the birth registration. The documents filed by Ms. Celeste contain contradictory paternal information." I acted confused, of course, concerned, cooperative. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," she said carefully, "that there will be an audit, possibly even a DNA verification order. You may need to provide a new sample." The trap was closing. Celeste confronted me that night. "Why did they call you? Why not me?" I kept my voice calm. "I don't know. What's going on?" She looked like she wanted to scream but couldn't find the air. "Someone's setting us up." I raised an eyebrow. Us? She hesitated. I mean, me. I think it's Axel. He's gone silent. He blocked me. I tilted my head. I thought you said he wasn't involved anymore. She looked trapped. That's when I delivered the final fracture. I know everything, Celeste. Her mouth opened, but no words came. I know about the clinic, the bribes, the paperwork you forged to make me the legal father. I know about the messages to Axel, about the night you stayed at the hotel when you said you were with your sister. I know the baby's not mine. She crumbled like wet paper. You were never going to tell me, were you? Her hands shook. I thought you'd leave me, and I would have helped you raise him, if you'd been honest. She looked up, eyes wet. I love you. No, I said, stepping back. You love having control. Then I dropped the real bomb. I gave you the wrong baby. She blinked. What? At the hospital, after delivery, I had a friend on the inside. Someone owed me a favor. The tags were switched. You never noticed, did you? You were too busy planning your perfect lie. You're lying, she whispered. But her face had already gone pale. I handed her an envelope. Photos, signatures, even a video from the maternity ward. Everything perfectly timed. That baby? Not Axel's. Not mine. Not yours either. She stared at the photos like they were written in fire. You don't get to choose truth only when it suits you. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing, shaking, ruined. I'll give you a choice, I said. Confess everything, publicly. Admit what you did. Or I'll go to court, and not only will you lose custody, you'll be charged with fraud, medical deception, and obstruction. She didn't respond. I walked out, leaving the envelope in her trembling hands. Later that week, her post went viral. I lied, it read. I falsified a paternity claim. I betrayed someone who trusted me. I accept the consequences. And in a quiet hospital room, I held the child that was meant to be mine from the start, the real one, swapped back before anyone noticed. And this time, I whispered no stories. Only silence. Only peace. The first few weeks passed in quiet triumph. I watched from a distance as Celeste posted filtered photos of herself cradling our son. She named him Micah. She wept publicly on social media about how motherhood had changed her, how grateful she was to have a man like me by her side. All lies, wrapped in aesthetic lighting and curated hashtags. But what struck me most was how quickly she convinced herself the baby was mine. There were no questions about his eyes, his blood type, or the features that didn't match. She never mentioned a DNA test again. She was so desperate to secure the fantasy she'd built, she didn't dare scratch the surface. I, on the other hand, had the truth in my arms. The real baby, my baby, was safe, cared for, and loved by the only person who hadn't betrayed anyone in this story. A quiet adoption through a trusted friend. A woman who'd lost her own child years ago and still wore grief like a second skin. She had agreed to help me, not for money or favors, but because she believed Celeste didn't deserve him. At first, I told myself I wouldn't interfere beyond that. Let Celeste live her lie. Let her build castles on sand. But something inside me couldn't rest. I'd see her on morning talk shows, gushing about our miracle baby and how strong our relationship was after a rocky patch. I watched as Axel Warren reappeared. He always would, like a stain that wouldn't lift, and commented vague emojis under her posts. Fire, hearts, a devil face. I knew the game. I'd played it long enough. And then I found out about the book deal. Celeste was writing a memoir, a tell-all, about me, about us, about how she had overcome my coldness and emotional withdrawal to build a family from broken pieces. It wasn't just insulting, it was dangerous. Because once the spotlight turns, people start asking questions. And I had too many secrets buried under layers of legal duct tape. I didn't want fame. I wanted silence. So I made a call. Just one. To Axel. Axel answered on the third ring. His voice was groggy and slurred. He was either drunk, high, or both. If this is about child support, tell Celeste to call my lawyer. It's not, I said calmly. It's about your son. Silence. Then a laugh. You've lost your mind. That baby looks nothing like me. He's not yours, I said. But the other one is. Another pause. A long one. You gave her the wrong baby? He finally asked, his voice lower now, curious, amused. I didn't give her anything, I replied. She lied about whose child it was. I simply stopped correcting her. A slow exhale from his end. Then a chuckle. Well, damn. You always were smarter than the rest of us. I need a favor. Of course you do. I want the truth to come out, but not from me. Not directly. What do you mean? You know the kind of man I am. You've watched her manipulate every man she's ever dated. You've seen what she does when the spotlight hits. She's gearing up for a media tour. She's got producers sniffing around, a memoir, a fake family brand. Sounds like her. I want you to go public. With what? The truth. Your version of it. That she told you the baby was yours. That you suspected something was off. That she never wanted the child but saw him as leverage. That she slept with both of us. That she didn't know who the father was. Why would I help you? Because I know about the apartment in Prague. Silence again. A sharp, cold silence. That was years ago. Doesn't matter. You still own it under your assistant's name. You've been funneling money through a ghost company. I have documents, screenshots. You'll be finished if this leaks. You're blackmailing me? No, I said, almost kindly. I'm giving you a chance to be the villain on your own terms. He cursed under his breath. You really haven't changed. And neither has she. But the rest of the world deserves to know. I hung up. 3 days later, Axel went live on his podcast. He spoke for 42 minutes about toxic women, emotional manipulation, and being misled about paternity. He never named Celeste directly, but he didn't have to. The tabloids did the math for him. And Celeste, she exploded. She showed up at my doorstep the next morning. Not in one of her curated outfits, not with cameras or a smug smile, just in sweatpants, a hoodie, and eyes so red-rimmed they looked bruised. You set him up, she said, voice hoarse. No, I said, stepping aside. I told him the truth. She walked in like she owned the place, which used to be true. But now, even the furniture had been changed. It wasn't hers anymore. You're destroying my life, she whispered, pacing. Do you even care about your son? I do, I said. That's why he's not living a lie. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean for it to get this far. But you meant to lie. You meant to manipulate me. You meant to cut out Axel because he was a liability to your image. You used that child as a pawn. She collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. I didn't know what else to do. I was scared. I stayed silent. Let her sit in it. Then she looked up at me with trembling lips. Please, give him back. I stared at her. Which one? She blinked. What? You said you wanted your son back. But I've been raising Elias, my son. You walked away from him when you found out he wasn't Axel's. You didn't fight. You didn't cry. You signed the papers so fast it was like you couldn't wait to erase him. And now that the media's turning against you, you want to act like you care? I made a mistake. You made a campaign. She stood. If you don't give him back, I'll go to court. I tilted my head. Go ahead. But I've got the DNA test, the texts you sent Axel, the signed custody transfer, and now, a public record of your lies. You'll lose everything. For a moment, she looked like she was going to scream, but instead she just deflated. I loved him, you know, she whispered. Both of them. No, I said. You loved what they gave you. Status, control, attention. Not them. I walked her to the door. Elijah asked about you yesterday, I said softly. But I told him you were busy being famous. Her lips quivered, but she didn't reply. She walked out into the morning sun, the door closing gently behind her. For the first time in a long time, my house felt quiet. Not empty, peaceful. 6 months later, the world had moved on. Headlines faded. The outrage cycle spun into something newer, shinier. But inside my home, peace had finally taken root. Elias, my Elias, was thriving. He'd started preschool where he insisted on being called Rocket. I didn't ask why. Every day, he came home with dirt on his knees, paint in his hair, and stories that made no sense but always made me laugh. He called me Dad, without hesitation, and every time he did, a part of me healed. As for her, Mira had gone quiet. After our confrontation, she tried to spin the story. Of course she did. First as a misunderstood mother who'd been tricked, then as a victim of postpartum confusion, then as a reformed advocate for transparency and surrogacy. But nothing stuck. The receipts were too strong, too public. And people, real people, knew the difference between a mistake and a long con. Axel, to his credit, kept his distance. I never saw him again, but I heard he took a job overseas, far away from the spotlight. I wasn't angry at him anymore. He'd been Mira's first puppet, just like I was the last. There were moments, though, when I wondered if Elias would ask. Not now, but maybe someday. About the other baby. About why his mom vanished from his life. About what really happened. I didn't have all the answers yet. But I was preparing. One night, after Elias had gone to bed, I sat down at my desk and opened a blank document. At the top I typed, "To my son, when you're ready." And I began to write. About the day I found out he wasn't biologically mine. About the panic, the betrayal, the heartbreak. About the decision to keep him anyway. Not as a martyr, not as revenge, but as a man who finally understood that love, real love, is a choice. I wrote about how terrified I was when the court hearing came, how the judge looked at the DNA results and then looked at me holding Elias's tiny hand, and how, after all the evidence, all the noise, all the lawyers, the only thing that mattered was one quiet sentence. This child knows who his father is. I wrote about how I cried, not because I won, but because for the first time, I didn't feel like I'd lost. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. But my resolve never wavered. Raising Elias wasn't just about love. It was about restoring a life that had been nearly stolen by deceit. Every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every "Dad, look," was a reminder that family isn't only about biology. It's about choice and commitment. I started volunteering at the local community center. helping other parents navigate complicated custody issues and broken relationships, sharing my story quietly, hoping that my experience might save someone else from the kind of pain I'd endured. I realized that while my journey was deeply personal, it was also universal. Betrayal and redemption, loss and new beginnings. Elias's laughter became my anchor. I watched him grow with fierce pride and cautious hope. I vowed to be the father he deserved, honest, present, and unwavering. And Mira? She faded from the spotlight as swiftly as she had entered it. Her book deal fell through, and the media's fascination shifted elsewhere. A few months ago, I learned she had left the city, moving back to her hometown, perhaps seeking the anonymity she so desperately needed. I felt no triumph in her downfall, only relief. The past was settled, but the future remained unwritten. One afternoon, while Elias napped, I found myself looking at the letter I'd started, the one addressed to him for when he was older. I realized I didn't want it to be just a story of pain and deception. I wanted it to be a legacy of strength and forgiveness. I folded the paper, placed it in a box alongside his first shoes and favorite blanket. A capsule of truth for the day he was ready. Because sometimes, the most important stories aren't about how you were hurt, but how you choose to heal. Years passed. Elias grew into a boy with a curious mind and a kind heart. He never asked about the past, at least not yet. And when he does, I'll be ready. I'll tell him the truth, not to burden him, but to empower him. Because truth, even when it hurts, is what sets us free. I look back now, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. For the strength I found when everything fell apart. For the chance to rewrite my story, one day, one moment at a time. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to remember, it's this. We are not defined by the lies told to us, but by the courage we have to face those lies, to rise beyond them, and to choose love. True, honest, and unbreakable. My story isn't just about betrayal. It's about reclaiming power. It's about becoming the father I was always meant to be. And it's about knowing that even when the world turns its back, you can still find your way home.